Jim Thorpe is the greatest all-around athlete this country has ever produced. There may have been other greater individual performances, but his was a singular achievement. Babe Ruth, the Bambino, was the greatest baseball player that ever lived. His outsized personality and his on and off field exploits made him world famous. He hit a home run for a dying kid, but he never played professional football. Jim Thorpe did. Michael Jeffrey Jordan, MJ, was the greatest basketball player there ever was. He revolutionized both the sport and the shoe business. He is a two-time inductee into the Basketball Hall of Fame as an individual and as a member of the Olympic Dream Team. But he's not in the College Football Hall of Fame. Jim Thorpe is. Richard Petty is the all-time winningest race car driver ever, with almost twice as many wins as his nearest competitor in any motor sport. But he did not also win Olympic gold medals in the decathlon and the pentathlon. Jim Thorpe did. Muhammad Ali, Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., a.k.a. the Louisville Whip, a.k.a. the greatest, was the only three-time heavyweight champion of the world. Ali transformed the sport of boxing with his unparalleled prowess in the ring and by the sheer force and magnetism of his personality. He floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee, but he never played professional baseball. Jim Thorpe did. Man o' War was considered by many the greatest thoroughbred of the 20th century, who also sired 64 stakes winners, including Triple Crown winner War Admiral and Clyde Vandis and the 1929 Kentucky Derby winner. But Man o' War was never president of the NFL. Jim Thorpe was. Ted Bundy was the Babe Ruth of serial killers. Having confessed to at least 35 murders, authorities say the real number is in the hundreds. He is the gold standard by which all other serial killers are judged. But his face was never on a stamp. Jim Thorpe was. If for some reason you missed my previous show, Dead Astronauts, let me get you caught up. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Thank you. I come from a long line of alcoholics and drug addicts, including, but not limited to, my father, my brother, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great, well, you get the idea. Alcoholics like to tell stories. Here's mine. I arrived at 6:30 on a Tuesday night in the year of the dog at Booth Memorial Hospital in Queens, New York. I came out kicking and screaming with 2 club feet, a tilted pelvis, and a couple of tiny fists. I was born without a sucking reflex, which meant I couldn't nurse, which means I couldn't breastfeed, eat, or drink from a bottle. My father had to cut giant X's in the top of the nipples and basically pour the formula down my throat. Excellent early training for a future alcoholic. At this rate, the doctor wasn't sure I'd live more than a couple of weeks. If I couldn't breastfeed, wasn't sure I wanted to live more than a couple of weeks anyway. I didn't walk until the age of 3. My mother carried me everywhere. Maybe she was trying to take the sting out of the whole breastfeeding thing. To this day, I don't walk if I don't have to. I'm still just one nipple away from riding in a rascal. The second time I fractured my skull and the second time I got busted for arson were at the same place. Though not at the same time. It was in Piedmont Park. Piedmont, California is a city on a hill. It is surrounded by the city of Oakland. It is a well-to-do community. A lot of people gravitated there after the earthquake of 1906 leveled San Francisco. It was close enough to the city, but safe from earthquakes and flooding. Maybe flooded. We used to hang out in Piedmont Park, which was right next to the high school. If you hung out in the park and did drugs, you were called a parkie. I was a parkie. There were also the clubbies. which were the jocks. It was all very S.E. Hinton in the outside. A book I love, by the way. Famous residents have included actor-director Clint Eastwood, who was a clubby, Robert McNamara, former Secretary of Defense and the main architect of the Vietnam War, Al Davis, owner of the Oakland Raiders, and the main architect of being a fucking asshole, Stephen Weed, who was Patty Hearst's boyfriend when she got kidnapped, the occasional Hell's Angel, former tennis pro and coach Brad Gilbert, and his sister Dana, who was most notable for accidentally flashing one of her breasts during a tennis tournament once, and former ambassador Christopher Stevens, who was tragically killed in Benghazi. We went to high school together. We weren't friends, but it was a small school. Guess which one of us went to class? You're right. The night I fractured my skull for the second time started out like any other, hanging out in the park with friends, getting drunk and high. Someone had a new bike, and I decided to go for a ride. Because nothing says bike ride like a beautiful summer night and an intoxicated teenager. I got up okay, but the bike was bigger than I realized. But when you're drunk and high, everything does. Am I shrinking? Anyway, I got up, and I got going. I got going good. Now, if you told me I was at the top of a hill when I started out, I would have said, no way. But before I knew it hit me, I was rocketing to the bottom of the hill like a half-baked Jamaican bobsledder. I was flying. This was also a bad time to realize I couldn't reach the pedals. So now I'm flailing around on top of a 10-speed like Stephen Hawking trying to ride a unicycle. I got to the bottom of the hill soon enough and hit a pothole. Handlebars went hard to the right. I went hard to the left. This is where my problems really started. There's that moment, I don't know if you know it, if you've ever experienced it firsthand, but it's that moment when everything stops, time stands still. That moment is frozen. It's that moment right after you've been launched. It's that moment when you've been catapulted. It is that moment when you are airborne. A whole lifetime is contained in that one moment. You are weightless. You are free. You have transcended your physical body. You can see the other side. You hear about this moment from people who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. I realized about halfway down I wanted to live. And wow, look at that traffic. You hear about it from professional athletes who say when they're in the zone, everything slows down. They're one step ahead of everyone else. It is that moment right between, oh shit, and oh fuck. Now, I would never recommend being drunk to anyone. But, if you ever find yourself reduced to being nothing more than a hurtling piece of debris, might not be a bad idea. It certainly came in handy when I got hit by that car a few years later. Trust me. If you ever find yourself on the hood of a speeding vehicle, you're going to wish you had a couple of drinks. I finally fell out of the sky, re-entered the park's atmosphere like a discarded and charred remnant from Skylab, hoping and praying my momentum would carry me all the way to the bushes. I hit the ground hard and I hit it head first. Now obviously this was in the days when the only people wearing helmets were the football team and a couple of kids in special ed. I don't remember the impact, I don't remember anything else from that night. Somehow I gathered myself together, drove home, threw up on my brother's bed. He wasn't in it. And went to sleep. My mother took me to the doctor the next day. On the Ferry side of our family, my father's mother, we were all descended from an Irishman called Matthew Meehan, who emigrated to the United States in 1805 and settled in northeastern Pennsylvania. Matthew had a daughter named Hannah, who later married a man named Condy Haggerty, my great-great-great-grandfather. Condy Haggerty was a carpenter. Not that one. Who came to this country from County Donegal in Ireland. He was 5 feet 4.5 tall with dark hair, blue eyes, and a dark complexion. He enlisted as a private in the 81st Pennsylvania Volunteers on September 24th, 1861, about 5 months into the Civil War. On or about the 1st of July in 1862 on the peninsula of Virginia, after the Battle of Fair Oaks and on the retreat to Harrison's Landing, he suffered from exposure and contracted chronic kidney disease from laying out night after night without shelter. The fact that this was quite common among soldiers of the time brought Condy Haggerty little comfort. During the Battle of Chancellorsville, which includes the second bloodiest day in Civil War history, May 3rd, 1863, if you're keeping score at home, he was wounded when a shell fragment lodged in his right thigh just below the hip. It also affected sciatic nerve. A family doctor later stated in Condy's declaration of pension that these injuries left him, quote-unquote, 2/3 incapacitated from obtaining a subsistence from manual labor. Anna, Condy's wife, had a brother named James Meehan, who quickly enlisted in the Army on June 15, 1863, in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, in what was called at the time an emergency. The emergency, more than likely, was Robert E. Lee's invasion of Pennsylvania and the resulting Battle of Gettysburg 16 days later. Probably. Father and son went off to war. Matthew Meehan, the father, was subsequently killed during the Battle of Gettysburg. James Meehan was discharged from the Army a month and a half later on August 1st, 1863. He rejoined the Army on August 18th, 1864, and was assigned to the 202nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. Rumor has it for $50 and free whiskey. But knowing our family, he probably did it for the whiskey. In the fall of 1864, while on a march through the Shenandoah Valley at Thoroughfare Gap, James Meehan caught a horrible cold and his eyes became sore. According to the Encyclopedia of Virginia, the weather in Virginia during the Civil War fluctuated between extreme precipitation and alternate periods of blazing heat and bitter cold. Try wearing wool through all that. War might be hell, but wet wool is a fucking nightmare. He was treated by the regiment physician, Dr. McCormick. His eyesight troubled him not only throughout the war, but for the rest of his life. He was honorably discharged from the Army later that summer on August 3rd, 1865. After the war, James Meehan, by allies and all, became a brakeman for the Central Railroad of New Jersey, or as it was generally known, the Jersey Central Railroad. According to the census of 1880, he made his home at 131 South Street in Mock Chunk, Pennsylvania. At this point in the story, I'm living in a flea bag hotel in downtown Oakland. Flea bag is a little bit of a misnomer. Cockroaches were the real problem. It was called the Alice Club Hotel. It was a converted moose lodge located on the corner of 14th and Alice Streets in downtown Oakland. It was built in the 20s. And while it still retained a hint of its former glory, I mean, the Moose weren't the Mormons after all, so it didn't quite rise to the Mormon standards of grandeur. Still, it must have been something back in the day before they turned it into an SRO, single room occupancy hotel. The Alice Club Hotel was a 6-story building. Only the top 3 floors were residential. The lobby was huge and empty. They weren't encouraging anyone to hang out in it. The ceiling was 2 stories high. Your footsteps echoed for days on the stone floor. There was a long walk to the front desk, which looked like the information booth at a low-end laundromat. All visitors must sign in. The elevator was all rattle and hum. It moved so slow it felt like you were traveling back in time. It took so long as if we were orbiting the floors like they were unmanned planets, and we were looking for a safe place to land. There was an empty pool in the basement, and a large, formerly ornate ballroom on the 3rd floor. There was a TV room and a laundry room on the 2nd floor. I didn't spend a lot of time in either. Although I did wake up in the TV room once after I overshot the dosage on the Dilaudid my buddy Ralph had given me. I came to on the couch with a chin full of spittle and the TV blasting a Lakers game. Honestly though, I was more of a Night Train man. Night Train is a fortified wine. From the so-called category of bum wines, like Thunderbird. What's the word? Thunderbird. How's it sold? Nice and cold. And Wild Irish Rose and MD Mad Dog 2020. Night Train is produced by the fine folks at Gallo Wine. It's known for its cheap price and serious kick. I had a tendency to throw my shoes out the window whenever I was riding the train. The label on the bottle showed a freight train, a full moon, and a wolf howling at the moon. The tagline was Night Train. Taste the night. Okay. Well, if the night tastes like a 3-day blackout, job loss, and the bitter tears of regret, then hell yeah, I can still taste good. I've been told the 3 basic ingredients of Night Train were alcohol, sugar, and formaldehyde. You provide the excitement. I lived in room 622. I had a view of the Taco Bell parking lot right below me, and a McDonald's on the corner of 14th and Madison, where both of my brothers worked before they went to college. A block up from there was the main branch of the Oakland Public Library. At one point I had a stack of about 10 or 12 books a year overdue. Every night I would sit there and look at the library and think, maybe tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes the next day, and the next day becomes never. And before they built a big office building directly in front of me, I had a completely unobstructed view of Lake Merritt. Beautiful Lake Merritt. The crown jewel of downtown Oakland. Equally famous for its signature necklace of lights, its children's fairyland, and a small but noble, and by noble I mean sad, zoo. We used to get drunk and visit the monkeys sometimes. I remember one time, one of the monkeys looked like he was trying to tell me something. He was looking at me with those deep, pleading eyes, and he was trying to mouth something, and I was looking at him, and Jackavorkian? And then he did it again more emphatically. Jackavorkian! And then he took his little monkey hand and drew it across his throat to emphasize his point. And this quickly devolved into a spirited game of lip reading, pantomime, and suicidal charades. By the end of the night, we were all laughing and having a great time. Don't try to tell me monkeys aren't smart. But mostly, Lake Merritt is remembered because someone found a foot in it once. A single shoeless foot turned up in the lake one day. You'd think there'd be more to the story, but there really isn't. Someone lost a foot and we all moved on. I had a nice enough room. It was decorated in classic mid-century Roach motel. Had a couple of metal desks, a plastic chair, and a dresser, and a slightly larger dresser. There was no kitchen. They weren't even supposed to have a hot plate. No phone. You're allowed to have a phone. I just couldn't figure it into the budget. Besides, there was a payphone in the lobby. And no bathroom. There was a sink and a fairly large closet. Occasionally, for a change of scenery, I would sit in the closet and drink and read. I had a radio with cockroaches in it. They didn't come with the radio. They moved in when I moved into the Alice Club Hotel. They had a tendency to change the station. They seemed to lean towards classical. There was a stack of newspapers next to my chair, which started out as recycling and ended up being a coffee table. One of my sisters gave me a goldfish once. I put the bowl right on top of the papers. The goldfish lasted maybe a day. All signs point to suicide. Bathroom and the shower were down the hall to the right on the way to the elevator. The whole time I lived there, I never had to wait for either. Kind of makes you wonder where everybody else was going to the bathroom. If you turn left outside my room and walk to the end of the hall, and crane your neck just right, you could see the Tribune Tower. There's a big landmark in downtown Oakland, and a giant clock on it. You always knew where you were if you could find the clock. It was true north. It was a beacon. It was landfall. And it certainly came in handy when I was having trouble with my own clock. Occasionally my clock would start running backwards. I even had an alcoholic clock. This is a problem when you're coming out of a 3-day blackout. I didn't get to know a lot of the other residents in the building, although I do know the guy a few doors down died, and it took him a little while to figure that out. Well, after a few days, I think we all figured it out. It wasn't all crazy people, drunks, and misfits. Mostly, but not all. Not like the Will Rogers Hotel where my buddy Ralph was staying. Now that place was a fucking dump. First thing that hit you when you walked in the front door of the Will Rogers Hotel was the smell. That's the thing, it actually hit you. It physically assaulted you. It reached out and punched you in the face, poked you in both eyes, grabbed you by the throats, and then kicked you in the nuts for good measure. This was an angry and heartless smell. I was very proud of the fact that while my knees buckled the first time it hit me, I never lost complete consciousness. I was like Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. Bloody but unbowed. I never went down, Ray! I never went down! It was a heady and stupefying mixture of vomit, mothballs, rotting flesh, urine, but this was the 80s, so everything smelled like urine, and industrial quantities of disinfectant. The smell was like some prehistoric hazing ritual. The smell was so bad it affected your short-term memory. Nothing came before this smell. The lobby was littered with bodies, many of the fallen having no doubt succumbed to the smell. If you were lucky enough to hack your way through this iron curtain of stank and make it to the front desk, you had to sign in. All visitors must sign in. There was a couple that ran the place. He was an angry little man who ran a tight ship, which is easier said than done when you got a place full of ex-cons, mental patients, drunks, drug addicts, and broken down old people. And she was made up like a madam, or a grandmother. They're not mutually exclusive. I had a small gold-plated thin pen that my mother gave me from a jewelry store where she worked, and I was using it to sign in one night. And when she saw it, she said, "Ooh la la." Was that the madam or grandma talking? Later, when we got upstairs, my buddy Ralph said, "She really likes you, man." I never heard her talk like that with anyone. He also told me if I wanted it, I probably had a shot at her. The Will Rogers Hotel, which I ended up getting thrown out of in a blackout one night. So I guess I was the one guy Will met that he didn't like. Sat in the shadows of the Tribune Tower, home of the Oakland Tribune newspaper. There was a bar next to the Trib. I would go in there occasionally. I was in there one morning having a drink. I was job hunting and reading the classifieds. And I happened to look up and notice that there was another guy in the bar, and it was somebody I happened to be in rehab with a few months earlier. There was that moment of sheepish recognition. And we both just shrugged our shoulders and raised our glasses. Maybe next time. The post-Civil War years were not kind to Conde Haggerty. As a result of his war injuries, which included the shell fragments, the injured sciatic nerve, tumors in his thigh, a shortening of the ligaments, pain and stiffness, it made even the simple act of standing incredibly difficult. He spent the rest of his life fighting with the War Department, trying to receive his veteran's pension, which he never did receive during his lifetime. He lived at the National Home for the Disabled Volunteers in Dayton, Ohio, from May 1878 to July 1880. Sometimes It's a feeling, a sound, or a smell. It could be a touch, it could be a song, it could be a word. It could be a color, it could be a sign, it could be a flower. It could be a person, place, or thing. Somehow something flips a switch, and you tap into your sense memory. The smell of new mown grass never fails to bring me back to those halcyon days of my youth. Running from yard to yard, playing until dark. Peals of laughter and shouts of joy reverberating between the houses. The golden glow of a simpler time. Reveling in and reliving that exact moment. Magic and immortality are just within your grasp. You're the most alive you will ever be. It is both wonderful and bittersweet. This was kind of one of those moments. According to the Washington Post, the use of PCP is on the rise. Talk about memories. Like a lot of children, I went through an experimental phase of pushing the limits and boundaries of what or wasn't acceptable behavior. Who among us hasn't played doctor, started smoking, done some shoplifting, some minor property damage, underage drinking, started using profanity, little breaking and entering, maybe even some arse? I say who? Drugs were off limits and very bad. Remember they showed us all these anti-drug movies in school, you know, where the guy takes a hit off a joint and goes jumping out a window? I can fly! Yeah. Or he runs into traffic. Don't head to the light, Gary! Don't head to the light! Even as a kid I knew this wasn't true. I'd already smoked pot and was smoking cigarettes by the 3rd grade. And I hadn't tried to jump out a window or play chicken with an oncoming 18-wheeler yet. So when a friend of mine said, hey, you want to smoke some PCP? You can imagine my answer. PCP, also known as angel dust, supergrass, hog, whack, rocket fuel, zoot, killer joints, elephant tranquilizer, monkey dust, gorilla pills, Tic Tac, tragic magic, dust, zoom, butt naked, DOA, goon, lethal weapon, and mad dog, was tried out as an anesthetic in the 50s, until it was discontinued for human use. It was also used for a little while as a horse or elephant tranquilizer. Now the fact that it was deemed unfit for both human consumption and the animal kingdom would, I suppose, be a deterrent to most people. But you ever met an elephant that really knew how to party? I mean, really party? It works as an hallucinogen, stimulant, depressant, and anesthetic all at the same time. That's 4 drugs in one. Just say no. Just say when. Now, as good as all this sounds, there are some side effects. Moderate amounts of PCP often causes the user to feel detached, distant, and estranged from his surroundings. Yeah, so does puberty. In some cases, numbness, slurred speech, and a loss of coordination may be accompanied by a sense of strength and invulnerability. We're still in puberty, people. It can cause paranoia and violent hostility. It may even produce a psychosis indistinguishable from schizophrenia. So the operative word here being moderation. The first time I smoked PCP was at a shopping mall in New Jersey. I was a freshman in high school. The guy we got it from told us, make sure you don't smoke too much. It came in joint form. It was a really small joint. My first thought was, what a rip-off. We smoked it at the mall. We were in a service hallway, a medieval labyrinth of shadows and echoes. If you're going to be estranged from your surroundings, this was an excellent place to start. We lurched out into the mall like the cast of Dawn of the Dead, the musical, on the first day of rehearsal. Or a bunch of rejects from a Ramones video. Well, bye, with our dulled frontal lobes and our glassy eyes, with our inability to process language. We were a lumbering, stumbling mob of the teenage undead. We had just dropped a couple of notches on the evolution chart. We were the children of the corn.
Oh.
None of which is all that unusual for a mall in central Jersey. One of the things I always loved about getting high was how it brought everyday mysteries to light. The mundane is miraculous. Everything was to be explored. You think it's just a paper napkin. It is so much more. I remember spending what seemed like hours communicating with a tree once. I'm telling you, man. Sometimes I hugged the tree, and sometimes the tree hugged me. Or being utterly stumped by the sheer engineering genius of a doorknob. Wait. Do I turn it? Or does it turn me? Man, talk about the doors of perception. This wasn't one of those moments. I didn't feel high. I didn't really feel anything. It was as if I was on the outside looking in, like there was a filter between me and everything else that was going on around me. It was like I was at the bottom of a well or behind glass. It was like I was watching a really boring television show where nothing was happening and I couldn't change the channel. It was like watching paint dry, slowly. I think I could still speak, but I'm not sure. It was definitely an out-of-body experience, but not in a good way. I wasn't floating above everyone, looking down from the clouds. I didn't turn into a plant or an animal. I didn't have any special powers, and no inanimate objects were speaking to me. I was used to the universe opening up to me, not shutting me down. I'm talking about a world of talking plants and smiling appliances. Being shunned by the outside world is one thing, but having a toaster turn its back on you is just cold. The hero was just another slack-jawed, catatonic, semi-ambulatory, mute teenager with no ability to process feelings or reason. It seemed like a good time to leave the mall. The plan was to go to the McDonald's across the street, and the road we had to cross was a giant 6-lane road. And this being the 70s, the speed limit was probably 85. Cars are flying by 6 inches from us. The road is full of big American cars. There wasn't a compact in a bunch. Steady stream of sea-land trucks and buses heading to and from New York City. It was an ocean of neon and diesel smoke. The idea was to walk down and cross at the light. But it seemed like every step I took, the light receded more and more. At this rate, we'll never make it. Now, if you're jacked out on whack or gooned on gorilla pills, the person next to you can seem like they're a million miles away. So the traffic light figured to be at least a 3-day trip. And I don't know if it was the monkey dust talking or not, but this trip had Donner Party written all over it. Be lucky if we make it halfway to the light before we started eating each other. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But I knew immediately I was going to need a shortcut. Not quite Columbus. I set off for the promised land. The sun came and went. The seasons changed. Crops rose. Crops failed. Babies were born. The dead were buried. Leaves fell off the trees and the snows came. Jackrabbits danced in the field. Birds were chirping. Salmon spawned. And the eagles took flight as the vultures were circling. Small animals were picking at my bones. The coyotes sang their mournful song as wildfires raged in the hills. The second time I smoked PCP was at a high school basketball game. One of my sisters gave me a stack of writing tablets. At the top of each page were the words, "Dear Fuckface." During the years I lived in downtown Oakland, I kept a little bit of a sporadic journal. Here's some of what I wrote. February 21st. I came out of a blackout in the balcony of the Pussycat Theater in downtown Oakland with a half-empty bottle of Night Train in my lap, and I was pissed. Normally I hate coming into a movie late. Who the hell are these people? What the hell is going on? And why are they speaking Dutch? Granted, plot, relationship, and story are less of an issue in way film pornography. Still, I want to make sure I got my money's worth. Adult movies cost more than a regular movie. You know, it's probably $5 or $6 in 1980s money. There were no Dollar Wednesdays at the Pussycat Theater. That and a large bottle of Night Train, which cost $2.10. And there goes my walking around money for the rest of the week. I don't even know if they have concessions in an adult movie. Though I think we can all agree the sticky floor ain't butter. When I started to recognize the carpet, it was time to leave. I bounced out onto the bright mid-afternoon sidewalk, barely missing a guy in a Boy Scout uniform buying a ticket to get in. And immediately ran smack dab into a girl I'd gone to high school with a few years earlier. I was walking down the street with a friend or a co-worker. I don't know. I don't remember any introductions. How immediately, I wonder. Was I just out for a casual drunken stroll, or did they see me leave the theater? Hey, Chris! What have you been up to? This was an excellent question. And while I generally consider myself an open book, she probably could have answered this question herself. I've been drunk for a week, hadn't showered or shaved in days, just spent my last $6 on a possible Dutch porno movie. My sneakers are sticking to the sidewalk like I'm trying to tap dance through glue. I may or may not still have one in a series of progressively worse jobs, including but not limited to sorting discarded library books in an unopened school, and a 5-hour-a-week janitor job that proved to be too time-consuming. I was in the grips of a massive addiction, and there wasn't a day in the last few years I didn't wish I was dead. Never better, Leslie. How are you? March 18th. My buddy Ralph came over to my room the other day. We finished up what booze we had and decided to go for a walk. We managed to scrape together enough for another bottle, and then we then settled into a doorway to enjoy our drinks and thoughtfully watch people at ankle level as they made their way to work. Which is probably why we didn't see the cops show up. We saw their shoes first. But of course by then it's too late to make a break for it. May 5th. I was sitting in the Golden West with Ed, a bar friend, who asked if I wanted to go to the movies. Now, I've been a movie buff my whole life, so I thought this was a great idea. Besides, it would be good to get out of the bar for a while. I had just seen Psycho 2 recently. Just okay. So I was ready for something different. Excuse me. We leave the bar and we start walking. The theater where I saw Psycho 2 was up on Broadway, a few blocks away. We didn't walk that far. And ended up in an adult bookstore with a bunch of little viewing rooms in the back. A sober man would have seen this coming. We walked down a dark, gooey hallway to a dingy, cabana-sized room, lit by a 6-watt bulb. He latches the door. Well, the evening has certainly taken a turn, I think, as I try to find a corner to hide in. He drops a chunk of change in the wall slot. The movie starts, and it's gay porn. The evening has suddenly taken another turn. For a couple of minutes in, he asked if it looks good, and did I want to recreate the scene we were watching. Okay. Well, technically, yes, I was an actor. But it's been a while since I'd done any real scene work. I think the last time I'd done anything was a scene from The Odd Couple, for an acting class I was taking. Now, on the upside, the scene didn't have a lot of dialogue, and the blocking was pretty straightforward. On the downside, I wasn't remotely interested in being blown by a middle-aged guy twice my size in the back of a dirty bookstore on a cold, rainy Sunday night in downtown Oakland. Thankfully, Ed accepted this information without incident, and we both left the store. He went back to the bar, and I ducked into a doorway, where I was joined shortly by a homeless black woman. See that guy I said pointing across the street? He just offered to give me a blowjob. How much did he want? I'll do it for $5. I don't have $5. How much do you have? Let me state for the record. This was not a negotiating ploy on my part. I'm not in the habit of haggling with homeless hookers. Or hookers in general. I respect the market. But I literally did not have a dime on me. Hey, drinks in the movie were on Ed. She was still working on the hard sell. I can give you a hand job for $3. I'm telling you, I don't have any money. If you don't believe me, you can check for yourself. And she then proceeded to go through all my pockets like she was panning for gold. Which was frankly okay with me, since she was the only thing holding me upright at that moment. June 12th. I've been drinking in my room for a while and decided to stretch my legs. Downtown Oakland in the morning is a quiet, peaceful place. The sidewalks are spread out like a dewy asphalt meadow. The early morning mist still clung to the top of the damn city sidewalk. I'm not sure how far I got before I needed to take a break. I was unusually winded for such a short trip. I'd used all the available wall surfaces and parked cars to make it this far. I finally found a good resting place and decided to stop for a few moments to collect my thoughts. I was dreaming of electric sheep when the policeman woke me. June 15th. I just bought the bottle. I had cobbled together enough change to get a half pint of White Wolf vodka. After I left the liquor store, I caught a cop out of the corner of my eye, silently watching me, leaning against his car a few doors up from the liquor store. Shit, I thought. It was too late to make a change, as my drunken momentum carried me in his direction. So I fortified myself, locked my eyes on the middle distance, and marched on with a Frankenstein-like precision. Right when I got by his car, he opened the back door without a word, and I got in. November 2nd. I stepped off the bus at the Greyhound station and was immediately met by 2 City of Oakland policemen. I'd been out of town visiting a friend for the weekend and been in a drunken blackout for most of that time. Are you Chris Anger, they asked. The night air took on a sudden stillness, like I had just stepped off the 310 to Yuma, or into a Hitchcock film. The lobby was full of furtive glances, unspoken accusations, horror, and pity. I've been afraid of it and waited for this day for as long as I can remember. But with blackouts comes responsibilities. It was time to finally come clean. I've lived the last few years of my life as if they were just days away from finding the body. Anybody. They frog-marched me through the lobby as the townsfolk parted. I kept my head down as I looked for a way out. There was a kid in the corner, licking a lollipop, holding a birthday balloon, staring straight at me. His mother pulled him away quick. "Don't stare at the bad man," she said. They perp walked me out through the crowd, and there was my mother standing by her car with another cop. So this is how it ends, I think. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. I don't blame you, Ma. You did the best you could. Turns out my mother, she was coming to get me, made an illegal U-turn in front of the bus station. And when the cop stopped her and asked her what she was doing down there, she said she was on her way to get me. And they told her it wasn't a safe neighborhood, and she should stay with the car they would go get. She didn't get a ticket, and they never found the body. Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, is in the Lehigh Valley in a part of Carbon County and sits on the banks of the Lehigh River. Its original name was Mock Chunk, which translated from the Indian means Bear Mountain. The elevation is 1,519 feet. Population as of the year 1900 was 4,020 people. In the year 2000, it was 4,804 people. It has been called the Switzerland of America. It is known as the gateway to the Poconos. It was home to the world's first roller coaster, which brought coal down from the mountains. Mock Chunk was a company town. The company was either coal or the railroad. We were a railroad family. Going back to the 1800s, numerous generations of our family worked for the railroad, including Condy Haggerty, my great-great-great-grandfather, his brother-in-law James Meehan, Thomas P. Ferry, my father's grandfather, who was a double amputee as a result of a train accident. He later made his new legs out of wood and then started his own prosthetic business. He was also a county commissioner in Carbon County, including John C. Duffy, who my great-aunt Alice married. She left the nunhood to marry him, and his brother Duff. They all worked for the Jersey Central Railroad. On June 21st, 1877, 4 of the Molly Maguires were hanged in Mock Chunk, what came to be known as the Day of the Rope. And for those of you that don't know, the Molly Maguires were a 19th century secret society active in Ireland, Liverpool, and the United States. The Mollies were mostly known for their activism among Irish-American coal miners in Pennsylvania. And for those of you that still don't know, just Google the movie with Sean Connery. And coincidentally or not, one of the Mollies hung on the Day of the Rope was also named Duffy. I ain't saying they were kin, but I ain't saying they ain't. Jim Thorpe died on March 28, 1953, in Lomita, California, while having dinner with his wife. He was 64 years old, broke, and a chronic alcoholic. His body was soon moved by train to his native Oklahoma, where his third wife and widow, Patsy, spent months shopping his body around, trying to find someone who would pay for the privilege of having Jim Thorpe buried in their town. Not at all happy with the state of Oklahoma's treatment of her late husband, the widow Thorpe, in the middle of a traditional 3-day sack and fox Indian burial ritual, busted in with some state troopers, and according to eyewitness reports, stole his body and had it loaded into a waiting hearse. After unsuccessfully offering up his body to the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, she saw a report on TV about the towns of Mock Chunk and East Mock Chunk. The town was separated by the Lehigh River. For having a nickel-a-week fund to help increase business and tourism. Sensing an opportunity, she offered him a deal. In exchange for his name, the body, and anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 from the nickel fund, it was all theirs. The city fathers quickly took the deal, and she then had him shipped. And in 1954, he was officially laid to rest. I use the term loosely. In the towns of Mock Chunk and East Mock Chunk, officially became Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. Needless to say, this move was not without its controversy. To this day, some people are still unhappy about the change and happily refer to themselves as chunkers. As part of the deal, Mrs. Thorpe had also promised that they would build a hard hospital, a football hall of fame, and bring in an annual NFL game, none of which ever happened. 30 years later, they were still pissed. All we got is a dead Indian, said local resident Stephen Duffy. On November 9th, 1881, Condy Haggerty died in Mock Chunk, Pennsylvania. According to the physician's affidavit, he was found at the foot of a perpendicular wall about 12 feet in height, from which he'd apparently fallen sometime during the previous night. There was a contusion on the back of the head about 1.5 inches long, such as would probably result from falling on a stone or other blunt, hard object. There had been considerable hemorrhage from the mouth and nose. The story in the paper read, Condy Haggerty, prominent citizen of Mock Chunk, was found dead this morning at the foot of an unprotected high wall. There are suspicions of foul play. 100 years later, in 1981, I am slumped in the back of Raquel Welch's limo. She's not in it. Drinking beer out of a paper bag at 8 in the morning. I've just gotten off the red eye from California. And after a quick stop at a liquor store in Queens, we're on our way to my father's apartment at 60 Riverside Drive on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. which also happens to be the former apartment of both Harry Belafonte and Tina Louise, though not at the same time. Otherwise, you guys would be a completely different show right now. Less than 24 hours later, I'm slumped in the back of a Greyhound bus, hungover and sweating out my weight in booze, and headed to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania for a hastily arranged and unplanned visit to my great Aunt Alice, the ex-nun, who I haven't seen since childhood and have no real recollection of ever having met. The last time might have been my grandmother's funeral. I was going to be picked up by Jake Sullivan, who was married to another sister, Marion, who, FYI, had a wet brain from years of alcoholic drinking. In fact, except for my Aunt Alice, all 5 of the children of my grandmother's family were drunk. Aunt Alice married one instead. It's the next best thing. My father told me for years that if I kept drinking the way I was, that I was going to get a wet brain and end up in a state-run facility somewhere. His tone made it seem like this was a bad thing. Jake picked me up at the bus station in Easton, Pennsylvania, the hometown of former heavyweight champion of the world, Larry Holmes. When I arrived at Aunt Alice's little house at 208 South Street in Jim Thorpe, she greeted me from her favorite seat in the living room with her house coat on and a freshly lit cigarette going. In anticipation of my arrival, she had the fridge fully stocked with cold cuts and a case of beer. There's that moment. I don't know if you know it, if you've ever experienced it firsthand. But it's that moment when everything stops. Time stands still. That moment is frozen. The whole lifetime is contained in that one moment. I passed on the sandwich and went right for the beer. There are a lot of ghosts in Jim Thorpe. Not just the hundreds of years of dead relatives, but generations of coal miners and railroad workers. Not just Jim Thorpe and his unsettled bones. Not just the day of the rope. Surrounded by mountains and split in the middle by a river, there's a distant, persistent hum that hung over the town. I'm not sure how long it was before I decided to go for a walk, or how quickly I found the only bar this side of the river. It was a short walk made quicker by the sharp 45-degree downhill angle. Weechner's bar was tucked in the corner of a dead-end street in the shadows of a high wall. Directly across the street from Weechner's was the Carbon County Courthouse. Next to the courthouse were the steps that led down from the high wall that abutted the dead-end street. I don't know how long it took me to order my first drink, or how soon I learned the bartender's name was Al, as in Al Weechner, the owner of the place. There was one other person in the bar at the same time as me, and his name was Dee Dee, an obvious regular. I don't know how long it was before someone else came in. I'm not sure how soon it was before they called him Duff. Aunt Alice's late husband's brother was named Duff. I don't know how long it took me to make that connection. I'm not sure how long I stayed. I do know I came back the next day, and the day after that. I'm not sure how long it was before I was found face down in a crumpled, drunken heap at the bottom of a high wall. It's unclear how far up the 25 steps I made it, or how quickly I reached the bottom. There's no official record of how many steps I hit on the way back down. It's unclear at this point if I bounced off the giant stone statue, which stood at the foot of the steps, honoring the locals who died during the Battle of Appomattox. It's a few feet away, but it's totally doable, with the right amount of drunken momentum. It's unclear at this point which part of the trip caused the head wound. It is unknown how long I was out when Duff found me. To this day, no one knows how I survived the fall. But what we do know is, I started drinking again shortly after regaining consciousness. Many families can trace their history back to the beginning. Maybe it's a plot of land, or a little hut in the country. Maybe it's a cobbler's shop, or Plymouth Rock. Who knows? Maybe it's even a manger. Well, we don't have a family tree. We fell and hit our head on Plymouth Rock. We got thrown off the Mayflower. We were asked to lead the Last Supper. Hey, all we asked was, who you got to kill to get a drink around here? In our family, when we speak of the old country, all roads lead back to a single patch of blood-stained sidewalk in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.